Oeste International Partners is a volunteer organisation registered in Portugal. We have two main objectives. Firstly, since many of our members are keen to share with others their professional skills and experience as well as their hobbies, we aim to benefit local communities through organised volunteer projects. Secondly, we aim to bring together members of all the international communities in the Oeste region from which our membership is drawn. We're pleased to welcome you to our new project, Let's Cook. This is a light-hearted cookery series with a difference. Each week on Thursday evening at 7 p.m, a different home chef will share with you their love of cooking by showing you how to make typical dishes from their home country. We're going to introduce you to home chefs from several different countries living here in the Oeste region. They'll present dishes typical of Chinese, Dutch, French, Portuguese and Russian cuisine, for example, but we have many more national cuisines to share with you. Every Tuesday, we'll advertise to let you know which cuisine will be presented the following Thursday. If you enjoy watching the Let's Cook presentations, you might consider making a donation to support one or more of our many projects, which include helping the day centres for the elderly and helping the homeless and disadvantaged communities in the Oeste region. Here are our bank details, and the name on the account is Oeste International Community Volunteers, and please put Let's Cook in the reference. If you'd be interested in making today's dishes, then here's the list of the ingredients you'd need, together with the method you should follow. So, sit back and enjoy. And now, let's cook.
Hello, this is Ray Husthwaite, and today, welcome to this next edition of Let's Cook. Today, I'm going to be doing the traditional Scottish dish of haggis. Simply because it's next to impossible to make haggis if you're not in Scotland, and come Burns night in particular, many of my Scottish friends say it would be wonderful to have a haggis, but we can't get such and such. But there are workarounds if you're clever and get to know butcher well, and that allows us to make a fairly decent haggis, but without a lot of the trimmings that go with it and the difficulties that go with it. So I'm hoping that come Burns night this year I'll be able to have a bit of a party here. The problem is, of course, that when you're making haggis you're kind of limited to what the butcher provides you with. So originally I would like to have made enough haggis for 4, but I'm probably going to make enough haggis for 10, so you can imagine that there's going to be a good party sometime over the next few days with my friends and a great deal of whiskey. Okay, the history of haggis is long and complicated and shrouded in legend. Some things we know for sure, some things we don't know very much about. We know that the Romans had something a bit like haggis, but they used pork meat, whereas we are going to be using lamb. We also know that there was a recipe in England somewhere in the 14th, 15th century that looked very much like haggis, using the stomach of a cow. But again, that's hotly debated. What we do know for sure is that after the Act of Union of 1702, when Scotland and England combined together as a single nation, it was supposed to be a diplomatic coup. It was supposed to be the joining of two countries to make one. What it really was that the English took over. And when the English landlords took over, what was already a fairly poor country became increasingly poor as they diverted resources into their own pockets and away from the people, and the people went hungry. And when you've travelled around the world a bit, you begin to realise that wherever you go in the world, where one country has conquered another country, the peasants have to make do with what's left. You go to China, for example. One of the delights of going to China was eating gristle and cartilage. This is the sort of thing we would put in the bin. But the Chinese can take cartilage in particular and turn it into fabulous dishes. Go to India, lentils. Lentils taste of nothing very much. They're horrible things. But give that to an Indian chef, and within an hour or 2 or 3 you'll have a fabulous dish. Well, what did we have in Scotland? The good bits of the sheep they took for themselves. What was left over was the bits and pieces. What grows well in Scotland is oats. Nothing very much else. Oats and barley. We turn the barley into our national drink, whiskey. The oats we make into porridge. The only things that would grow there, and they're very cheap, very easy to get hold of. What else could you get? You get a few root vegetables perhaps, growing in your field. But most of all, what you're left with is the bits of a sheep that no one else would want to eat. So what do you do? Well, what you do is you combine the oats with the bits that no one would eat. And what you get is a kind of meaty porridge. How do you cook it? Well, what else have you got left over? What you've got left over is probably the stomach or the cecum of the sheep. So to make convenient cooking, you stuff your porridge into that. You stick it in some water and you boil it. And what you get is a very nutritious and tasty meal that costs next to nothing. When you're a starving peasant, this is the place to go. From around about 1700, you begin to see in England an increasing amount of good quality meat eaten. In Scotland, the porridge continued, the haggis continued in the poor, and so it's become very much a national dish. But even so, when you've got bits and you've got oats, what you don't have is very much taste. So what you then go for is spices. I've got here a mixture of black pepper and coriander. Coriander, 18th century? Yeah, coriander was around in the 18th century. I've got some sage, probably a Mediterranean herb, but it's growing in the garden, so I'm going to stick that in it. And what you then get, put all of these things together, you get something tasty and nutritious. Not just nutritious, but actually tastes good. At least you try to pretend that, particularly when you've got visitors. So it's become very much connected with Scotland because of that. Particularly after Culloden in about 1760 something, 1770 something. When the English took away the bagpipes, they took away the kilt, they took away the weaponry of the Scots. What was left that made you Scottish was haggis. And so over the past 200-300 years, it's very much become partly a joke, partly a national dish. Trouble is here, I can get the bits, I can't get the stomach. And that's where it becomes a little difficult, and we're going to have to do some workarounds to make the haggis tasty and still haggis. And to do that, we turn to the microwave. And if you're going to do this, you're going to need a microwave steaming dish. Something like this one. But an ordinary ceramic microwavable dish covered with some cling film will do just as well. I just happen to like this one because it's got the easy lid on it. I'll probably, at the end of this, when you look at the amount of haggis, amount of bits, and the amount of oats, and the amount of onions, and the amount, I'm probably going to fill this 3 times, but I'm only going to make one just now. The rest will go in later on and go into the freezer for fun. Okay, so let's get on to the mise en place. What I've got in here, which I'm going to empty in the sink because it's a bit bloody. We've got what we call the top pull of the sheep. These are the bits that we normally don't talk about. Hidden from view. I want to keep it on this chopping board and have that one for vegetables if I can. You can see we have got kidneys, we have got liver, we have got the heart, and we have the lungs, and we still have the windpipe, and the dogs are going to have a lovely time because we're not going to need that. So we also have 300 grams of oatmeal. We've got 250 grams of suet. It's a mixture of vegetable and animal suet because I didn't have enough animal suet. I've got 4 onions, 3 medium onions, 4 small onions chopped. I've got 4 tablespoons coriander seed, siantai. I've got 2 tablespoons black pepper, and I have a nutmeg in here, which I'll be grating in a moment or two. I've got a little bit of sage out of the garden, and that pretty well is all we need, except we're going to need some stock. This is just ordinary stock from Lidl stock cubes. The first job, however, is to break this down into the pot so it can be cooking. First thing we need to do is separate out the lungs and the liver. So it's going to be a bit of a biology experiment, this. We don't need to be careful with it, but all of this connective tissue by and large doesn't cook very well, so we want to get rid of a lot of this. There we go, this is the diaphragm here. We really don't want that. That'll get separated out and it will be a delicious treat for the Muppets later on. Just grab it. So you put the bits in. There we go. That can go. The fat around the kidneys we don't want. That also can go to the dogs. There's some debate about whether I should be using kidneys at all. In a classic haggis we wouldn't put the kidneys in, but these are nice kidneys and we've got them, so we may as well use them. So we'll get rid of a bit more connective tissue here. A bit more of the fat around the kidneys can go. Because fat around the kidneys is actually what suet is, but we've got enough suet there. You know, it's funny when we're in China, the Chinese don't even have a proper word for suet, because we tried to get suet while we're there to do this. And I was talking to one of my Chinese friends, Wong Chen, and we were trying just to find the Chinese word for the fat around kidneys. And the best you could come up with was the fat around kidneys, because they don't seem to use it at all, at least not in Beijing cookery. So there's some, bit more there. I'll trim those out in a minute or two. I want to get onto the liver first. The liver, we want to just check for any large tubes in there. Tubes tend to be a bit bitter, but I think this has been well butchered, and I think we're in a reasonably good place with this. A bit of connective tissue there, and maybe just quietly get rid of. Here it comes. These dogs are in for a lovely treat tonight. I'm surprised they're not actually around my ankles at the moment. Let's chop this down. It's going to go into the blender later on, so we don't need to worry too much about making a neat job here. We just want to get it down into chunks which will cook well and reasonably quickly. We want to have about a 40-minute boil on this once it's all in bits. Just looking at this, do you know what I'm saying? I wonder whether I should keep a little bit of this back and make some pâté later. But let's not, let's just do this as if I was sitting in a little bothy somewhere in the glens with a hungry family to feed. We just want to get this done as quick as we can, get it on the fire, get it boiling. Let's see how it goes after that. I'm pretty sure that Robert Burns would have enjoyed this too. That's a good bit of liver. There you go. Now we've got that in there to speed things up a bit, you can stick the stock in and start heating it up. So this part of it is a fairly traditional way of doing it. Later on we're going to have to divert a bit because, as I say, we don't have a steamer, we don't have a sheep's stomach. But the things that are going in are the sort of things that would have gone in the olden days. But in terms particularly of the spicing, there's any amount of variation. Everybody's got their own take on this. If you put traditional haggis into Google, and you'll find any amount of recipes. Some use a lot more sort of standard herbs. So you find them with rosemary and thyme. You'll find them with bay leaves in them. You'll find recipes that just say there should only be pepper. There's a whole load of variation. So just at the moment I'm chopping down the heart. The aorta here is again a bit of heavy connective tissue, not terribly pleasant, so that can go, but the rest of the heart, as you can see, is very tasty. If you ever did biology at school, you almost certainly have taken one of these apart as a science experiment. It was one of the bits that students always used to enjoy a great deal when I was behind the blackboard. Go. Now we need to separate out the trachea and the windpipe and all the good bits from the lungs. Again, we don't need to be terribly careful about this because, as you can see, some of the tubes here, like the main the main bronchus there, is really quite big. So I'm just going to try and remove that. Not trying too hard. Get the worst of the tube out of the way. There we go. Okay, yeah, that looks good. I'm going to do the kidneys last because we have to be a bit careful with the kidneys to get some of the more bitter parts out of them. So a lot of the things that you're cooking with today, if you don't clear away the connective tissue, you don't clear away the windpipe, you can introduce an edge which is quite unpleasant in the haggis. Do you know what I'm doing? I'm putting that in there. I don't know. It's been one of those days for sure. Here we go. Now it's quite easy just to separate the lung from the windpipe. Okay, we now have the lungs in the boiling water. We've just taken down the kidneys. What we don't want is that white bit in the middle, which I'm just going to cut out. And then these can go in as well. Once they're in, we can sit back for 40 minutes and watch it boil, because this needs to come down to a really dense kind of pate almost. Do you know, I've never put kidneys in before. It's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. I think it'll make a kind of interesting little flavour to it. Oh. Go. Right, lid on, wash the hands. So it's now in the pot, the lid is on, it's turned right down onto a low simmer, and we'll let it simmer away for 40 minutes with nothing in it apart from the stock and the meat. All of the rest of this, oh, one more thing, just to get a little bit of flavour, handful of onions. There we go. Now, these will actually end up in the haggis, these ones will be discarded. Alright, to go with the haggis, another very traditional Scottish dessert is Cranachan. Cranachan fulfills the same thing in dessert as haggis does for main course. The material is easily obtained, it's cheap, it's filling, it's delicious. Essentially all it is cream, oatmeal, honey available from the bees. Raspberries grow everywhere in Scotland, so raspberries are free for picking off the bushes, and because it's Scotland we're going to need a little bit of this. This is Benbracken, which is very occasionally available from Lidl, but I bought it all when it was on the shelf, so don't go looking for it. It'll probably come out again, probably somewhere towards Christmas, but any well-flavoured, good quality whisky. When I say good quality, that means not White and Mackay. What I mean is something that says malt whisky on it. Something, I don't know, there you see sometimes Glenfiddich or on the shelves in the supermarkets. Anyway, anyone that's good. 40% alcohol. How much have I got? I've got, this is about half of the cream, roughly. And to begin, the first thing I've got to do is I need to toast this off a little bit. I'm going to heat up a frying pan. I'm using the big ring because I want to get a fair bit of heat in this, and I want the pan to heat up fairly evenly. As it comes up to temperature, just toss this in. I'm going to just toast it. And the sad thing about being a video is that you can't smell this until we get smelly vision. So what we're toasting it is until that lovely toasted oat smell starts to come out. It's not a set time because it'll depend on your pan, it'll depend on the oats, it'll depend on the heat. So we're just going to let it go, and we're going to get some flavour into it. While that's going on, I'm going to bung the cream into the mixer, and I'm going to do some horrible noise for a while to get it whipped and thickened. By experience, last time I was making Cranachan, I used the hand whisk, my old-fashioned hand whisk. I was standing there for about 20 minutes going, oh, wish this would thicken. So this time I'm using my wife's big mixer, and hopefully this will. If you have a little look at this, you will see that it's starting to brown quite nicely around the edges. Can you smell it? See, that nice toasty oaty smell. You take it too far, it will burn. But just at this stage, as it browns, turns a bit golden, and the smell that comes off it is just absolutely fabulous. And that's going to be the root of our Cranachan in just a few minutes. I'll just leave that to cool a bit. Okay, we're about 10 minutes later, and if you have a little look at this, it isn't heavily whipped, but it's just a nice sort of dropping consistency there. You see that? That's just about perfect, I think. Only one way to be sure though. Oh yes. Oh yes. Yum. You can see the oats are a lovely kind of toasted brown colour. First job, in with the oats. Going to mix those through and fold them nicely. We don't want to lose too much of the air that's been added in here. So gentle fold in. You can see that's changed the colour quite a bit. Honey, how much honey? Depends on you. About that much, probably. As with any good dish, we do it mostly by taste. Just see how it's going. Yeah, that's fine. Whiskey, about a tablespoon. Yeah, another tablespoon. Maybe another. There we go. That should do the job. That'll send Granny home happy. Again, fold through gently. And what we're going to do, we are going to layer these flavours. Just a few raspberries in the bottom, maybe about 4. Or maybe 5. We'll put some of the cream on. The fact of the matter is we'll have to clean this down a bit before we serve it. We're not going to worry too much about mess at this stage. Ideally, I would have preferred to have this in a wider mouthed glass, but we have what we have. Then, more raspberries. Because diameter's opening out a bit, we'll add a few more in at this stage. And then a bit more cream. And then finish off with a few raspberries in just a minute. And then clean the glasses. Cleaning up. Meat has now had 40 minutes cooking, and the job now is going to be to get it out and let it cool a little bit so I can stick it in the blender and mash it up a bit. So, using a slotted spoon, I'll just lift it, retain the gravy because the oatmeal is going to soak up all of this gravy shortly, but we need to get these big lumps reduced to a more sort of porridgey consistency, like a coarse pate. I would probably say it was like, or maybe even a bit coarser than that. But you can see here that one pluck from one sheep actually produces an awful lot of meat. This would feed a family of 4, probably 3 or 4 meals, and not walk away hungry once we've done it. And also in the olden days, back in the sort of 18th century, very much would be far more oats, far less meat. It would have been a much thinner porridge. So to make this right, proper Burns night, what we need is totties and neeps. Totties, potatoes, there's 4 medium-sized potatoes chopped in there. Turnips, you can't get a proper turnip in Portugal. What the Portuguese call a turnip is white, and doesn't really taste very nice at all. So to make that more like a proper Scottish Swede, which is what we would normally be doing, which is a kind of yellow colour and much sweeter, I add in some potatoes. Add in some carrots. The carrots are going to add a bit of sweetness and some colour to it. I'm going to boil these up. Now, the potatoes are going to take about 15 minutes to boil. These want to go for about 25 minutes because the turnip takes a while to cook through. So, I'm going to bung them in first. I'm going to liquidize this. I'm going to get the potatoes on, and after that we're going to deal with the spices. So while this is cooling and the water's boiling, I need to take my coriander and black pepper, and we're going to temper those rather like we were cooking Indian. Back onto the big ring, get a bit of heat into this, and this will go into the pan and it'll be tempered again just to release the flavours and the spices and the general oils, just to the point where it's going golden and you can get the smell coming from it. in the go. Remember, 4 tables of coriander seed, 1 tablespoon of black pepper. And there we go. The spices are starting to temper nicely. You start to begin to hear them pop. Listen. There we go. And that's it. Yeah. Again, just let them finish off in the hot pan. And we'll get them into the grinder in a moment. But at the moment, let's get these into the pan and cook them. Just enough to cover them. As soon as they're ready, we'll put 20 minutes on the clock, just so we can taste them after 20, but they're probably going to take 25. Right, how's this doing? It's cooling off nicely. We'll be able to do that in a minute. Let's get the spices into the grinder. There we go. Nothing to beat a coffee grinder for this sort of job. Look at the smoke. Smell the smell. That's going to make a nice flavouring for that in a minute or two. Pop them out. Yum. Okay, let's start getting the meat into the blender. These in bits. With a bit of luck, that should need a little bit of liquid in there, I think, to make this work. Let's pop some of the braising liquid into a jug, just so we can use that to soften this. There we go. Starting to go nicely. A bit more, I think. We don't want to take it too far, sort of a rough pate texture. Put the rest of this in here because I'm going to need that, I think. Back into the pan. Do the next bit. As I say, we won't be using all of this mixture today, but some of it I will hold back and it'll go in the freezer and it will become a lovely dinner for us in a couple of weeks' time. More of the braising liquid. Good. Last batch, I think. The oats, of course, are going to be taking up a lot of this liquid, so we're probably going to need a bit of water in this, I should imagine. I've got the kettle on just to give me a bit more water for the You see how quickly I'm doing that? I don't want this to go too fine. It's got quite a grainy texture to it. That's the way we want it. That's lovely. In with the onions. In with the suet. In with the oats. I think that's too much. I said 300 grams. Just looking at that, I'm going to leave maybe about 250. Pull back 50 grams. In with the spices. Everything goes in. This is at the boil now. Turn it down, start the timer. Oops. I told you that these were all a little wrongly offset. Better. There we go. Salt. Gotta have salt. About how much? But we'll taste just before we serve, just to make sure everything is hunky-dory. Rest of the braising liquid goes in there. Just enough water to cover it and bring it up to the boil. Now the danger with this is it's going to stick while we're doing this, so we'll need to keep a good stir on it and watch it. Watch the oats as they absorb, because as the oats absorb the liquid, this is going to come more and more thicker, and we're going to have to maybe add a little bit more water now and again just to see how it goes. But at the moment we're now pretty well, I've got a good haggis flavour. This is already starting to thicken as the oats cook through. Just a little bit more water. Watching it carefully. But as we go on through this, our final addition, a little bit of sage out of the garden. Wonderful Mediterranean herb that grows so well here. I can hear that glooping away behind me. It's a good sound. Oh, the pepper. Ooh, the pepper just comes through on the back of your tongue as the as the flavours develop. That peppery flavour will go back a little bit as it cooks. My own thought is, so one of these days I'm going to try putting a couple of chilies in, see what happens, because I reckon just about everything is better with a chili in it. There we go. Just pop that in. Put the kettle on again. I think we're going to need just a little bit more water in that before it goes very much further. Oh, that is looking very, very haggisy. Right, time to get the potatoes going. Well, the turnips are simmering away nicely. The potatoes, I've got too much water in. They're just coming up to the boil now. This has been simmering away for about 15 minutes, and if you have a look, the results from one heart and lungs of one sheep has produced a big pot. You can see how you could feed a family for several days on that. But since I'm going to be doing it down into sort of family-sized collections, I'm going to do this, the final stage, just in the in this little microwave steamer. This haggis is going to go in. You see the consistency? It's bloop consistency, basically. Thick and gooey. Well, put that in. Now, if I was doing this properly, if I was doing it the traditional way, I would have a nice clean stomach. I would stuff this into the stomach, tie off the two ends, and then bung it in a big pot, this sort of size pot of water, and simmer it for 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. Just gently boiling it. It is a better way. All sorts of delicious flavours will go into it if you do that as the spices and the meats mix. But for the purposes of not having a stomach, I'm just going to pop it into my microwave. There we go. Set it on to 20 minutes. Set it on 15 and taste. This, later on tonight, I'll pop into a couple more. We've got a whole load of them down there. I'll pop this into microwave dishes. I'll finish it cooking properly, and it'll go into the deep freeze to feed us for the next 3 or 4 months when we get the urge for haggis. So all it remains to do now is to mash the potatoes, mash the turnips, put out a couple of plates for service, and we will be done. Well, we've had a little break. We've got just 4 minutes left on the microwave. The potatoes are ready, the Swedes are ready, so let's get doing this. We're not going to do anything really exciting other than mashing. Another nice little Chinese innovation. It's a pan, but there are drain holes in the side of the lid. This is one of the things we definitely brought with us when we came home. Now, just a standard mashed potato, not trying to do anything clever here. A vegetable that will grow very well in Scotland. A little bit of salt, I think. It's potatoes, so we need some butter. Potato isn't potato without butter. And just to soften it slightly, some full cream milk. There we go. Quite tasty. Let's just wipe my spillage. And then the turnips and carrots. Pop them through the sieve. peas. Also going to get well mashed down. And this one with the butter and the milk, this one's going to go and get a good dose of fresh ground pepper. This is always harder work. I did try using the wand blender a while ago, but what happened was I put the wand blender in and it just turned into sort of claggy mush. It wasn't very nice at all. So although it's a bit harder to mash carrots and turnips, it's worth the trouble doing it the old-fashioned way, and it gives it such a lovely colour. You see that they've got the nice orange colour of the carrots offsetting the slightly peppery turnip flavour. This should be nice, I think. This is just about perfect, 1 minute 19 left on the microwave. It just allows me the last finishing touch from the new English shop that just opened the other day. Bisto gravy. Does life get any better? Proper Bisto. All the things you could possibly need that you miss, that you can't generally get in Portugal, like custard and stuffing and suet, incidentally. They've got proper Atora suet in there, which makes me happy because so many things are better with suet in them. One, two, three, four. Heaven forbid a chef should see me doing this. Another one for luck. Sounds like that's done. That's looking good. That also sounds like Mum might be back. Yes, here she comes. Just in time! The whole texture of it has changed with the cooking in the microwave. It's darkened slightly, it's cooked through. The smell that's coming off it is a very, very haggisy flavour. It's lunchtime, so I'm not going to plate up too much for our guests to taste. There we go. And some nice little bit of potato. Then a bit of the turnip, it's not possible to make this look beautiful. It's just peasant food served peasant style. And then just a little bit of good old-fashioned Bisto gravy. And we pass it over to our guests to have a taste. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that latest episode of Let's Cook, where I've been cooking traditional Scottish haggis with Cranachan. I hope you get a chance to cook this one day, and I hope you enjoy it.